Steve Harvey had a rule he lived by on that stage. Treat every family the same. Every contestant got the same energy, the same jokes, the same respect. He had stuck to that rule through 15 seasons, thousands of families, and more awkward moments than any highlight reel could contain. But there are things that happen on live television that no rule can prepare you for. It was a Tuesday afternoon in February 2024 when the Rodriguez family from San Antonio, Texas, stood on the left side of that family feud stage, 5 of them in matching navy blue shirts, smiling at the studio audience with the kind of nervous excitement that every family brings to that moment. And in the center of their lineup, standing with her chin up and her hands still at her sides, was Maya Rodriguez, 34 years old, a special education teacher, a woman who had not heard a single sound in 27 years. What happened in the next few minutes would never make the game show blooper reels. It would not end up in the funny moments compilations people share for laughs. It would spread across the internet because it was the opposite of funny. Because it was the kind of thing that reminds you what character looks like and what the absence of it looks like in the same 30 seconds. By the time Steve Harvey set his cards down on that podium, crossed his arms and said what he said, the entire studio was holding its breath. Maya Rodriguez was 7 years old the summer she got sick. It started the way a lot of things start: a fever, a headache, her mother Rosa pressing a cold cloth to her forehead and telling her to rest. By the next morning, Maya was in the emergency room at University Hospital in San Antonio. Bacterial meningitis. The doctors moved fast, and they were good doctors, and they saved her life. But the hearing was gone by the 3rd day. Both ears, permanent, total. Her father Carlos sat in the hallway of that hospital for a long time after the doctor explained what that meant. He was a construction foreman, a man who had spent his whole adult life solving physical problems, cracked foundations, faulty framing, walls that weren't plumb. He knew how to fix things. He did not know how to fix this. He sat in that hallway with his hands between his knees and looked at the floor for a while, and then he stood up, walked back into Maya's room, sat down next to her bed, and started learning sign language from a pamphlet a nurse had left on the bedside table. That was Carlos Rodriguez. That was the kind of man he was. The next 5 years were hard in the way that quiet daily challenges are hard. Not dramatic, not visible from the outside, but constant. Finding the right school. Fighting school districts for proper accommodations. Watching Maya learn to read lips with a focus and intensity that made Rosa cry when she was alone in the kitchen at night. Watching her adapt. Watching her refuse to stop adapting. Maya learned American Sign Language from a teacher named Miss Patricia at a special school across town. She learned to lip read with an accuracy that amazed the audiologists who tested her. She learned that the world was still full of information and meaning and conversation. It just came to her through different channels than it came to everyone else. By the time she was in high school, she was interpreting for herself at parent-teacher conferences. Sitting across the table from teachers and principals and reading their lips while her parents watched with a pride so large it sometimes looked like pain. She went to San Antonio College, then to the University of Texas, and she graduated with a degree in special education. Then she went back to the same kind of school that had helped her, back to the same work that Ms. Patricia had done for her, and she became a teacher for deaf children at Jefferson School for the Deaf on the south side of San Antonio. She had been doing it for 9 years by the time she stood on that family feud stage. 9 years of teaching children who had been told in one way or another that the world was not built for them, and helping them understand that the world could be navigated. That silence was not the same as absence, that they had something to say and there were always ways to say it. Her students called her Miss Maya. She kept a small whiteboard at the front of her classroom for the kids who were still learning to sign, and she always wrote the same thing on it on the first day of school each year, when the Family Feud producer called the Rodriguez family and confirmed their appearance. The whole family started preparing. But nobody prepared harder than Maya. She watched 200 episodes of the show over 6 weeks, not listening but watching. Reading Steve Harvey's lips on the screen, studying the phrasing of the questions, the rhythm of the answers, the way the board revealed results. She had her brother Marco quiz her with index cards every night after dinner. She worked with her personal ASL interpreter, a woman named Claudia, who would stand just off camera and sign the questions to Maya in real time during the taping. By the night before the taping, she knew the format cold. She knew how to position herself at the podium so she could see both Steve Harvey's lips and Claudia's hands at the same time. She had a plan, and she was confident in it. What she could not plan for was Tyler Kellerman. The Kellerman family from Nashville, Tennessee were on the right side of the stage. They were loud in the easy, comfortable way that people are loud when they have never had a reason to be anything else. There were 5 of them, a mother, 2 sons, a daughter, and an uncle, and they had a rhythm together that came from a lifetime of family gatherings where everyone talked at the same time and nobody felt the need to slow down. Tyler Kellerman was the younger son. 28 years old, sharp-jawed, the kind of handsome that knows it is handsome. He worked in commercial real estate in Nashville. He wore a blazer over a collar shirt while the rest of his family was in polo shirts, which told you something about him without a single word being spoken. The game started well. Both families were competitive. The Kellermans were fast and confident. The Rodriguez family, Maya, her mother Rosa, her brother Marco, her cousin Daniela, and her aunt Veronica, were organized and prepared in the way that families are when they have worked for something. The first 2 rounds went to the Kellermans by a narrow margin. The third round was close and ended with the Rodriguez family pulling ahead on the last answer. The energy in the studio was exactly what it was supposed to be. 2 evenly matched families, good television, an audience that was genuinely invested. Then came the 4th round. The question was on the board. Steve read it clearly, facing the contestants. He always faced the contestants, but today he was aware, more than usual, of Maya on the left side, who was watching his lips with that calm, focused attention he had noticed from the moment she walked out. He had pulled the producer aside before taping and asked about her. What did she need? How did the interpreter work? What could he do to make the questions accessible? He had practiced reading each question cleanly, without rushing, the way Maya's producer contact had suggested. Maya stepped forward for her family's answer. She had read the question cleanly from Steve's lips. She checked with Claudia, who confirmed the sign. She gave her answer in a voice that was clear and confident, a voice that sounded slightly different from a hearing person's voice, the way it does when someone has never been able to hear themselves and has learned to speak through vibration and observation and years of practice rather than through sound. It was a good answer. It was on the board. Third answer, 14 points. The audience applauded. And then Tyler Kellerman, standing across the stage, did something. It was small. That was the thing about it. It was small in the way that cruelty often is when it thinks nobody important is watching. He turned his head slightly toward his brother, and he made a face. A smirk, and he moved his mouth in an exaggerated, slow, mocking imitation of the way Maya's voice had sounded. His brother pressed his lips together to keep from laughing. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. But the studio camera caught it. And the front rows of the audience saw it. And the murmur that moved through those first few rows was the kind of sound a room makes when it has witnessed something it didn't expect and isn't sure what to do with. Maya didn't see it. She was already stepping back into line with her family, checking the scoreboard, focusing on the next exchange. Rosa Rodriguez, standing next to her daughter, saw it. She had spent 27 years watching for exactly the expressions people made when they thought Maya wasn't paying attention. She recognized this one immediately. Her jaw tightened. She put her hand on Maya's arm. Claudia, the interpreter, standing at the edge of the stage, saw it. Her face went still. And Steve Harvey, who was already in the middle of turning to address the Kellerman side of the stage, stopped. He turned back. He had been in front of cameras for 30 years. He knew how to read a room the way a captain reads water, by the currents under the surface, not just the waves on top. He looked at Tyler Kellerman. He looked at the audience in the front rows. He looked at the slight change in Rosa Rodriguez's face. He put his cards down on the podium. That was the moment the audience understood that something had shifted. Steve Harvey did not put his cards down. Not in the middle of a game. Not unless something had gone fundamentally wrong or fundamentally right. In this case, the studio could see from his face that it was neither of those things. It was something else entirely. He stood still for a long moment, long enough that the production team in the booth started exchanging looks. Then he spoke. One word. Level voice. No performance in it. The kind of tone that is actually quieter than shouting, but somehow carries further. The music stopped. The floor director froze. The audience went completely silent in the way that large groups of people do when a single voice has commanded the room without raising itself. Steve Harvey walked slowly to the center of the stage. He did not look at his cards. He did not look at the scoreboard. He looked at Tyler Kellerman. "Sir," he said, "I need you to look at me right now." Tyler's expression shifted. The easy confidence replaced, for the first time, by something less certain. He met Steve's eyes. "I saw what you just did," Steve said. "I want you to know that. I want you to know that I was watching, and I saw it, and there is not one person in this building who is going to pretend that didn't happen." The studio was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system. Now, I have been doing this show a long time. I have played this game with thousands of families. And I want to tell you something about this game, about this podium and what it means. Every family that walks out here worked to be here. They applied. They waited. They came in from wherever they came from. And they stood up in front of a live audience and put themselves out there. That takes courage. Every single time. He turned slightly, opening his posture toward the Rodriguez family without taking his eyes fully off Tyler. This woman right here, Maya Rodriguez, flew here from San Antonio, Texas. She spent 6 weeks preparing for this show. She watched 200 episodes. She worked with her interpreter. She practiced reading my lips so she would not miss a single question. He paused. "She cannot hear your laugh, sir. She cannot hear what you did right now. But I can. And every person in this audience can. And 10 million people at home are going to be able to." Tyler Kellerman's face had gone a dull red. "What I saw you do was mock the way this woman's voice sounds. A woman who learned to speak without ever being able to hear her own voice. A woman who has been doing something every single day for 27 years that most of us in this building could not do for 27 minutes. Steve let that sit in the room for a moment. "Now I am going to give you one chance to be the man your family probably raised you to be. Because I don't believe people are defined by their worst 2 seconds. I've had some bad 2 seconds myself." The audience let out a small, uncertain laugh, not because it was funny, but because they needed somewhere to put the tension. But I am not going to stand here and move on like I didn't see it. Because she deserves better than that. And honestly, so does this game. He looked at Tyler for one more moment. Tyler gave a small nod. He looked at the floor. Steve turned to face Maya. Maya had been watching his lips the whole time. She had read every word. Her eyes were bright. Not teary, not yet. She had the expression of someone who has spent their whole life deciding, moment by moment. whether to spend their energy on what people do to them or on what they do with themselves, and has gotten very good at choosing the second option. Steve walked to her. He stood directly in front of her, square, close, making sure his lips were fully visible. He spoke slowly and clearly. "Maya, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know you can take all the time you need." He paused. "Will you tell me about your students?" The question surprised her. Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. Then she nodded. And she told him. She told him about the classroom at Jefferson School for the Deaf. About the whiteboard at the front with the sentence she wrote on the first day of every school year. About the 8-year-old boy named Elijah, who had arrived in her class 3 years ago completely withdrawn, wouldn't sign, wouldn't write, sat in the corner with his hands in his lap, and who was now, at 11, the fastest signer in the class and had started teaching other kids to sign during lunch. About the parents who came to her in September, afraid of what their child's life would look like, and who came back in June, changed in a way they hadn't expected. She spoke in her voice, the same voice she had used all day, clear and confident, the voice of someone who had never let the fact that it sounded different from other voices stop her from using it. And the audience listened the way you listen when you know you are hearing something real. When she finished, the studio was quiet for one more second. Then someone in the 4th row started clapping. Then the row in front of them. Then the whole audience was on its feet. Every single person, including the Kellerman family on the right side of the stage, including Tyler Kellerman, who stood and clapped and looked at the floor, and maybe in that moment meant it. Maya Rodriguez stood in the center of that stage and felt the vibration of 400 people applauding moving through the floor, through the soles of her shoes, up through her body. She could not hear it, but she could feel it. And she looked out at the faces, and she understood what it meant. Steve turned back to the production team. "We're going to reset the 4th round," he said. No question in his voice, just a statement. Rodriguez family gets a clean slate. We go again from the top of the question. The floor director looked at his producers. The producers looked at each other. Nobody had ever reset a round on Family Feud. It was not in any rule book because it had never needed to be. The lead producer gave one nod. "Reset the board," Steve said. The Rodriguez family played the 4th round again. They swept it cleanly, Maya giving 2 of the top answers with the same calm precision she had carried throughout. By the end of the game, the Rodriguez family had won. They were going to fast money. Before the round started, Steve walked over to Maya one more time. He looked directly at her and said 4 words. She stood up straight. She took a breath. She went to the podium. She needed 48 points. Her cousin Carmen had gone first and scored 121. Maya scored 143. Final total, 264 points. The $20,000 prize went to the Rodriguez family. The clip aired 3 weeks later. Within 6 hours it had been shared by every major news outlet in the country. Within 24 hours it had been viewed 62 million times. But the moment that kept circulating, the one that people screenshotted and texted to each other and posted with no caption because no caption was needed, was not the fast money win. It was Steve Harvey standing in the center of that stage with his cards on the podium saying, "I saw what you just did." 6 words. That was all it took. The response was immediate and overwhelming in a way that even the show's producers had not anticipated. It wasn't just family show viewers. It was the deaf community, which had watched the clip and recognized something in it that went beyond one game show moment. It was the disability advocacy organizations that had spent years talking about exactly this kind of casual throwaway cruelty. The kind that happens in plain sight and gets ignored, and now suddenly had a video that showed the opposite of ignoring it. It was teachers who shared it in faculty meetings. It was parents of deaf children who watched it at their kitchen tables and felt something release in their chests. Maya's school, Jefferson School for the Deaf, was flooded with calls the week the episode aired. Teachers from other schools wanted to know how they trained. Organizations wanted to partner with them. Parents who were just beginning the process of finding schools for newly deaf children had watched the clip and then found Jefferson online at 2 in the morning and filled out the inquiry form with shaking hands. The principal called Maya into her office 3 days after the episode aired. "I have 17 new enrollment inquiries," she said. Maya looked at the number. She thought about Elijah, sitting in the corner in September with his hands in his lap. "How many can we take?" she asked. The answer was, more than before, because 3 new teaching positions were funded within a month, 2 through a disability education nonprofit that had seen the clip and reached out directly, and 1 through an anonymous donation that nobody confirmed but everyone suspected was connected to the Family Feud episode. Steve Harvey addressed the situation on his talk show the week after the Family Feud episode aired. He sat on his stage set without any guests and talked about it for 8 minutes, which in talk show terms is an eternity. "I want to say something about what happened on Family Feud last month," he said, "because I've been thinking about it every day since." He talked about Maya. He talked about what she had told him about her students, about the boy named Elijah. He talked about the whiteboard at the front of her classroom. She wrote the same thing on that board every first day of school. "You are not missing anything, you just hear it differently. I've been hosting a game show for 15 years. I've been in entertainment for 30. And I'm sitting here telling you that I learned something that day from a woman who can't hear a word I'm saying right now." He announced that his foundation was partnering with the National Association of the Deaf to fund an accessibility initiative for the show going forward. Dedicated interpreter services, enhanced caption production, and a new protocol for accommodating contestants with hearing loss at every step of the application and taping process. "We should have had all of this already," he said simply. "We're catching up." Tyler Kellerman did not make any public statement. He was not asked to leave the taping. Steve Harvey had not sought to humiliate him further, only to stop what had been done and name it clearly. His family released a brief statement through the show's public relations team expressing respect for Maya and her family. It was 4 sentences, and it was adequate and nothing more. Maya gave one interview to a magazine that covered deaf advocacy, and it was short. The journalist asked her what she wanted people to take away from the moment. "I don't want people to remember the thing that was done to me," she said. "I want them to remember what Steve Harvey chose to do. Because every person in that situation has a choice. You see something wrong and you keep moving. Or you stop." He stopped. That matters. That is the thing worth remembering. She was asked how her students had responded when they saw the clip. She smiled. "Elijah, the boy I told Steve Harvey about, he came to class the next day and he had printed out a screenshot of Steve Harvey stopping the game. He taped it to his desk. I asked him why." She paused. "He said it was to remind him that it was worth it to speak up, even when your voice sounds different from everyone else's." She looked at the journalist for a moment. "That's what I've been trying to teach him for 3 years. He learned it from a game show." In the months that followed, Maya was invited to speak at several deaf education conferences. She went to all of them. She stood at podiums and told her story the same way she told Steve Harvey, directly, without softening the hard parts, without asking for pity, and always ending in the same place, the classroom, the students, the work that was waiting when she got home. She used the $20,000 prize money, split among the Rodriguez family, to fund a new set of learning tablets for her classroom, tools that used visual and tactile feedback to help students at different stages of language acquisition. When the tablets arrived, and Elijah got his hands on one for the first time, and his face changed the way children's faces change when something clicks, Maya thought about the studio stage in Los Angeles and the standing ovation and Steve Harvey's 4 words. Yes, they always were. Carlos Rodriguez, who had sat in a hospital hallway 27 years earlier with a pamphlet about sign language in his hands, watched the Family Feud episode with Rosa in their living room in San Antonio. When it was over, he didn't say much. He was quiet for a while. Then he looked at Rosa. She was always going to be fine, he said. Rosa nodded. She took his hand. I know, she said. But it's still good to see it on television. The whiteboard at the front of Maya's classroom still has the same sentence on it that it has had every first day of school for 9 years. She has thought about changing it, updating it, finding something new. But every year she picks up the marker and writes those same 11 words, and every year. When she looks out at the new faces in the rows of desks, she decides the sentence is still doing its job. Some things don't need to be fixed, they just need to be kept.